I always believed death would come quietly, maybe a sigh, a dimming of light, but in my case, it came with laughter, not mine, hers. My niece Claire stood at the foot of my hospice bed, her lips curled in a cruel smirk as she watched my chest tremble, struggling for air. Her laughter, sharp mocking, cut deeper than the tumors in my lungs ever could. In that moment, I realized what hatred felt like. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg. With the little life I had left, I gripped the pen in my hand and wrote one final sentence, one that would ruin her. My name is Judith Holloway. I'm 73 years old, a former school librarian with no children of my own. My diagnosis, stage 4 pulmonary fibrosis, left me oxygen-bound, frail, and waiting for the end. What I didn't expect was that the girl I loved like a daughter would be the one to wait for that end with eager delight. Claire came to me at age 10 after my younger sister died in a car crash. Her father was gone, drugs or prison, maybe both. So I took Claire in. She was broken, scared quiet. I spent years giving her stability. Private schooling, piano lessons, art supplies. I gave her my inheritance early so she could start her business. She called me Mom until she was 16. But things changed once I started coughing blood. At first she was sympathetic, too sympathetic, insisting on managing my medications, my bank account, my schedule. So you can rest, she said. It made sense, until I found out she'd sold my car, then my antique book collection. Then the house was refinanced. My mail stopped arriving. Friends stopped visiting. She said they were busy or that I forgot things. Maybe I did. But I remembered the laughter. She had leaned down and whispered, "I hope you don't choke on your last breath." Oh, wait, actually I kinda do. And then she laughed and laughed. The kind of laugh you never forget. Malicious, triumphant. That's when I reached for the pen. I had taped it under the tray table weeks before, just in case. My hand was shaking uncontrollably. My breath came in rattles. But I had written 100 notes a day as a librarian. I could manage one more. 7 words. That's all I needed. Claire didn't notice. She was too busy scrolling through her phone, probably shopping with what was left of my savings. I tucked the note into my bra. The nurse would find it. I made sure of it. Claire wouldn't be laughing for long. Claire wasn't always like this. Or maybe she was, and I just didn't want to see it. When she first moved in with me, she was 10 skinny, silent eyes too wide for a child. Her mother, my sister Elaine, had died instantly in the wreck, and Claire had no one else. I'd never had children of my own. Raising her felt like a second chance at life. I sold my jewelry to get her into a good school. I stopped dating. I took on tutoring jobs in the evenings to pay for her painting classes and braces. Every time she called me Aunt Judith in public and Mom in private, I smiled like a fool. I thought love could undo trauma. I thought I could save her. By the time she turned 25, Claire was magnetic, beautiful, smart, confident. She started a boutique candle business thanks to the seed money I provided from my own retirement fund. "You're investing in your daughter," she said sweetly. I was proud. She moved me into a nicer house, said it would be easier to take care of me there. At first I believed her, but the signs crept in. She stopped asking how I felt. She started rolling her eyes when I dropped things or asked for help. Once she laughed when I couldn't stand up without gasping. I thought she was just tired, stressed. When she started managing my medication, she accidentally doubled my sleeping pills. When I confronted her, she said I was confused. I wanted to believe her. My body was failing, and maybe my mind was too. But the day I caught her forging my signature on a bank document, the fog cleared. I stayed quiet. Why? Because I was scared. Scared of being alone. Scared that if I said something, she'd leave me rotting in some state-run nursing facility, drugged into oblivion. She controlled my phone, my laptop, my visitors. My nurse only came twice a week, And Claire was always hovering, always smiling with that sickly sweet voice calling me poor old thing. One night I heard her talking on the phone. She'll be dead by spring, then the house is mine. I already listed it. She wasn't even pretending anymore. So I pretended instead. I acted like the docile old woman losing her mind. I asked for her help sweetly. I thanked her. I made her comfortable so she wouldn't notice the way I hid small items, wrote things down when she wasn't looking. I started practicing writing with my tremorous hands every night under the blanket using an old journal and pencil I hid under the bed. I knew I wouldn't get justice in court, but I could get something better. The truth. I was going to die, but she wasn't going to get away with what she did. Not if I had anything to say about it. The worst part wasn't the pain, it was the pretending. Each day I let Claire brush my hair, adjust my oxygen spoon food into my mouth, all while wearing that painted-on mask of concern. I would lie still, blinking slowly like a pet on its final day, and she would talk on the phone with her realtor, her tone laced with glee. "She can't even get out of bed anymore," she once said. "Soon I'll be free of this." But I wasn't dead yet. I noticed everything. The bank statements that stopped coming in the mail. The visitors she turned away with the excuse that I was too tired. The new diamond earrings she wore, which she claimed were a gift from a friend. The locks on my drawers changed. My wedding ring gone. She told me I'd misplaced it. I didn't have the strength to shout, but I had clarity, and I had time. That's when I started preparing. It began with the pen, a cheap ballpoint I smuggled from the nurse's coat pocket when she leaned over to check my vitals. I hid it under the tray table, taping it there with the sticky back of a used pill packet. My muscles were deteriorating, but each night when Claire went out drinking or met with her friends, I would prop my hand with a rolled towel and practice writing one sentence over and over. She killed me for the money. She forged the will. Look in the jewelry box. Eventually my hand steadied just enough for 7 clear words. Then I thought of something better. A name, a place, a secret. Something that only Claire and I knew, something undeniable. Something no one else could have written. Claire's biggest mistake wasn't her greed. It was her arrogance. She thought I was already gone. When I asked her for a new notepad to write my goodbye letter, she laughed and said, "Sure, Grandma Moses, go wild." She handed me a stack of paper and left the room. I used it for practice, and when I was ready, when I knew I didn't have many hours left, I wrote the real note, folded it tight, and slipped it into my bra where no one would check except a nurse. Then I waited, and it came as I knew it would. That day I could feel the final curtain drawing near. The rattle in my lungs was deeper. My vision was dimmer. Claire came in, phone in hand, barely glancing at me. She scrolled side, then muttered, "You're still here." I tried to lift my hand. She laughed. That's when I pushed out my final breath and dropped my hand across my chest, letting the air escape in a wheeze. She smirked finally. She turned to leave. She didn't see the nurse standing in the doorway. She didn't see what I had tucked away, but she would. Soon. They say the dead can't speak, but I did. It wasn't with breath or voice, but with ink. When the nurse entered, moments after Claire left, she gasped, rushing to my side. I was still eyes half open, gone. She adjusted the sheet over my chest and went about her procedures, quiet and reverent. Then as she rolled me slightly to check for sores, she felt the folded paper tucked under the fabric of my nightgown. She paused, frowning, then unfolded the note. 7 words, written in shaky script, still legible, still damning. She gasped again, louder this time. Nurses are trained not to show emotion, but she did. She didn't even try to hide the way she rushed to call the attending doctor. Claire was in the next room sipping wine and FaceTiming a friend, laughing, planning a spa trip once the paperwork was done. She didn't know that in room 204 the wheels were already turning. Within an hour, the hospice supervisor had read the note and ordered a full documentation review. They flagged my bank records, my power of attorney files, the change in my will that had been filed only 4 months prior, digitally signed, of course, when I was already too weak to lift a pen. The nurse didn't confront Claire. No, they were smarter than that. They handed the note to the administrator, who in turn contacted Adult Protective Services, then the police. By the time Claire sauntered into my room feigning sorrow for show, the note had already been scanned, copied, and verified. She stood at the foot of my bed, smirking slightly. "Guess I should cry or something," she muttered under her breath, assuming no one heard. But the nurse behind her did. "I'm sorry," the nurse said coolly, "but we need you to wait outside for a moment." Claire turned, brows raised. "Why, she's already dead." "Yes," the nurse replied, staring straight into her eyes. "And she left us something." It was the first crack in her facade. Her smirk faltered. She blinked, uncertain. I imagine she didn't sleep well that night. The next day, a detective arrived. He asked questions. He requested all the digital and physical records tied to my accounts, my living will, even my previous medical decisions. He requested handwriting samples. You see, I may have had pulmonary fibrosis, but I had a paper trail, a history of writing, note-taking, even personal letters to Claire from years ago. Enough to confirm that the final note was mine. And the contents, just 7 words. Claire forged everything. Start with the will. Short, precise, fatal. The detective didn't need more, because once they started with the will, everything unraveled. Bank fraud, false signatures, real estate transfers done without my consent. Claire didn't see it coming. She thought I died as helpless as I'd lived these past 2 years. But I didn't. I died with purpose. Claire's downfall began not with handcuffs, but with silence. The police didn't arrest her immediately. They watched, investigated, dug deeper. It was the kind of justice that didn't scream, it whispered, and then pounced. She must have felt it. I imagined she sensed something was off when the hospice stopped returning her calls. When the lawyer who had helped update my will refused to meet with her. When the estate agent suddenly pulled out of the house listing. But Claire was always overconfident. She probably thought she could talk her way through anything, just like she did with me. A week after my death, during what was supposed to be a quiet reading of the will, she walked into the lawyer's office in a designer coat and heels, her hair perfectly styled. I wasn't there to see it, of course, but I heard all about it later from the same nurse who found my note, now a witness in the case. Claire sat down, crossed her legs, and asked, "So how soon can we move this along?" The lawyer didn't answer. He opened a folder. "Read the real will, the one I had signed physically with a notary 2 years earlier, before Claire's control began. The one that gave 90% of my estate to a children's literacy charity. The one that left Claire only a single item, my annotated first edition of Pride and Prejudice, the same book she once called a waste of shelf space." She reportedly turned red, then pale, then furious. "There must be a mistake," she said. "There is," the lawyer replied calmly. "The one you forged." That's when the detective entered the room. According to the official report, Claire's voice shook as she denied everything. She accused the staff of coercion, claimed I was senile, that I'd hated her all along, that I didn't even know what I was writing. But the truth was no longer in her hands. It was in mine, in that trembling final sentence I had left behind. A sentence that matched decades of my handwriting. A sentence now verified by experts. A sentence that triggered subpoenas, audits, and a digital trail that led to more than just fraud. She had transferred over $200,000 out of my accounts into shell businesses and offshore apps. Or she wasn't just greedy, she was criminal. 2 days later, she was arrested in her condo mine, originally still wearing the earrings she claimed were gifts. I wasn't alive to see the handcuffs or hear the judge deny her bail or witness the tearful news reports about the niece who betrayed her dying aunt. But I didn't need to. I had already won. The last thing I wrote wasn't a goodbye. It was a reckoning. The headlines came fast after that. Niece charged with fraud. After aunt's deathbed note uncovered. Final words from dying woman expose shocking scheme. Justice from the grave. Claire's face was everywhere, once admired in social circles, now plastered on the evening news. Reporters called it poetic, even chilling, that a frail old woman silenced by disease had unmasked her abuser with one final breath. But to me it wasn't poetry. It was pain. The pain of watching someone I loved, turn into a stranger. The pain of being trapped in a body that couldn't cry for help. The agony of every spoonful of soup she fed me with a smile that no longer hid her disdain. The helplessness of hearing her joke about my death. They say vengeance is a dish best served cold. Mine was written in ink barely legible but indelible. During Claire's trial, they brought in handwriting experts. They compared the note to the journals I'd kept over the years, dozens of entries all in the same careful script. The jury heard the nurse's testimony, the bank manager's audits, the voice recordings from Claire's calls when she didn't know the line was still active. She never stood a chance. Claire cried in court at first, claimed she was misunderstood, claimed she loved me, but the evidence was louder than her tears. She was convicted on multiple counts of fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, and forgery, sentenced to 12 years without parole. The candle business went under. The condo was seized. My estate, once nearly drained, was salvaged thanks to the original documents I had stored with the lawyer years before her manipulation began. But this story isn't about money. It's about the silence I broke, about the legacy of a woman who had no children but left behind truth. After the verdict, the hospice nurse visited my grave. She laid a single white flower and said, "You did it, Judith." The staff told me they framed my note, the original, and kept it in the hospice break room as a reminder, not just of the need to listen to observe, but of the strength a dying person can still have, even in the end. Sometimes justice doesn't come with sirens or vengeance. Sometimes it comes with 7 trembling words. And now, though I no longer breathe, I speak louder than I ever did in life, because Claire laughed at my last breath. But now she wakes up each day to the sound of prison bars slamming shut, and she remembers what I wrote with it. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this: silence is not peace. So many of us, especially when we're old, sick, or alone, feel like we have no voice. We tolerate cruelty, dressed as care manipulation, hidden behind a smile. We accept neglect out of fear of rocking the boat, fear of being abandoned, fear of losing the only connection we have left. But your voice still matters, even if your hands shake, even if your breath is shallow, even if your time is almost gone. Speak, write, whisper if you must, but never let the darkness go unchallenged. Love does not look like control. Family does not mean ownership, and trust must be earned, not taken. My final words weren't just a note. They were proof that truth can outlive the body that tells it. Please protect yourselves, and when the time comes, leave behind more than silence.